come from Aharon. So you come from Aharon HaKohen, and therefore you rose above the other. So the Levium have limited what they do. They sing songs, which is it's an avodah, it's service, but it's not the same high level service. They'll morning Ronnie.
Right.
Morning, the Levium would take apart the Mishkan. They had the job of carrying the Mishkan, the boards of the Mishkan. Certain parts of they're in religious service, but a lower level responsibility and limited what they can do. As it's interesting, the Kohen cannot do the Levi's job, and the Levi can't do the Kohen's job, but the Kohen's job is a much higher level service because the Kohen is the one who processes the offering, right? You're the one who brings the offering on the Mizbeach, and also you were given a special mitzvah of giving a bracha to the people, right? You have the mitzvah of giving a bracha to the people. The Jewish community gives the Kohanim 24 gifts. You get the coins from the Pinyan Haben, you get the Truma. The Levium don't get the Truma. They don't get the coins from the Pinyan Haben. But the Levium do, because since the Levium are also serving the community, because they are taking care of, they are the gatekeepers, they are the singers, they are the teachers of Torah, so they were also supported. They also got gifts, but they had one main gift, which was a nice gift, 10% every year of the 7-year cycle. The first 6 years, the first six, not in the 7th year, that's Shemitah, but the first 6 years of the cycle, every year, the Levi would get 10% of the crops. What? Say it again. I would. We had them, and definitely we had them in Nassau, and we had we have to look more in the Torah about the. Here's more the inauguration of the Levium. Okay. Good morning, everybody. It's all right. It's Torah. It's all one Torah. They're all connected. Okay, we are on. Morning, Adam. We are on 28. We've been learning about the Beit HaMikdash, about the special room where they had wood, which would be on fire, which would be a heating room for the Kohen to warm up because his feet get cold. We don't want him to catch a cold. His feet get cold because he does a service without shoes and socks on. And we were talking about how much of the wood has to be lit on fire before the Shabbat, because in order that there shouldn't be a desecration of the Shabbat, that nobody should go ahead and fix the fire, move the wood around, make the fire larger, which would be a violation of Shabbat, of making fire. And yesterday, we started the piece which discussed, the Mishnah had said that when it came to the Beit HaMikdash, because the Kohanim were involved in that room, they just have to get the fire started. That's enough. You don't have to worry. The Kohanim are on top of their game. They're very diligent. They're not going to move things around. They're not going to stoke it. They're not going to, here it's a question of fixing it, making the wood higher. They don't have to worry about that. But if it's outside the Beit HaMikdash, right, Mr. Haber, and if we're making like a nice little bonfire outside the Beit HaMikdash, let's say for heating purposes or for light purposes, and we're taking a pile of wood, how much of the wood has to catch on fire before Shabbat that we're not afraid, Mr. Haber, that he's going to play around, move around, adjust it on Shabbat? We spoke about that regarding roasting meat. We spoke about the fact that you have to have at least a third or a half roasted. The Shulchan Aruch talks about a half, takes the more strict view. If it's not a half, you can't leave it on the fire because you might come afraid you're going to come stoke it, right? That was the story regarding roasting. And regarding cooking, we said there is a argument. Does it have to be also is half enough, or does it have to actually be fully cooked and not improving? Does it have to reach that level? Now, so now the Gemara was analyzing the outside the Beit Hamikdash. You're making wood, fire for warmth, for light. How much has to, the Mishnah stated the word rubo, rubo, which generally you would translate majority. So what does it mean, the majority? That was the question of the Gemara, and the Gemara said that Rav says the majority of each and every piece of wood has to be caught on fire, and Shmuel says that as long it doesn't have to be the majority of each and every piece of wood, as long as the fire is strong enough that people are not going to say we need to bring other twigs to help keep the fire going. We don't need it, as we said yesterday, we're not going to need any more lighting fluid. If we don't need any lighting fluid to help, if there's no concern that we might need lighting fluid, so therefore there is no, good morning, there's no concern of you could go ahead and leave that going before Shabbat. You could leave as long as it reached the point that the fire is going good enough that people will not say, we need to bring some more wood. And then the Gemara brought a support. We're up to Tani. If you look back at the Gemara, maybe we'll go back a drop. Ubigvulin, we're on 28.3, the top of the page. Ubigvulin kadesha tocheis berubo. If you're outside the Beit HaMikdash, you have to have enough fire that it's going to take place. It's going to take hold of the majority. My Ruban, what does it mean? The majority? Amarav rov kolecha ve'echad. The majority of each and every piece of wood. If you have 10 pieces of wood, you need the majority of. See, like we said yesterday, it doesn't mean 6 out of 10. It means 10 out of 10. Right? 10 out of 10, but how much 10 out of 10 is the majority of each piece of wood has to take hold before Shabbat. Now, so the Gemara, Shmuel says, Shmuel has a more lenient opinion. As long as there's enough fire that people will, let's say you have 10 pieces of wood, as long as people will not say we need additional wood to keep the fire moving, keep the fire going, that's sufficient. Tani, Rav Chia, now, then the question is according to Shmuel, who says as long as you don't need to add more wood, that's good enough. So what does the word beruban mean? Right? Berubon, the word ruban sounds like majority, and he's not saying it means majority, right? So the question is, what does the word ruban mean? So the commentary over says you could explain that you have to light many. Beruban means many pieces of wood. And as long as many pieces of wood is lit, so then you're not going to need any other more help. So that's what maybe Ruban means. The fire has to take place in many of the pieces of the wood. That's it. Okay. Now the Gemara says, Tani Rav Chia l'Siyud l'Shmuel. It's very interesting that this is connected to this week's parasha. What's this week's parasha? Bahalotcha. Torah says Bahalotcha Taneirot, when you light the Neirot. So now, what is the word? If you want to say the word to light is lahadlik. So the pasuk could have said bahadlikatach, when you light. Use the word. The Torah could have said the word when you light. It doesn't say the word when you light the neirot. It says when you bring up the neirot, when you bring up the fire, when you bring up the light. Is that interesting language? Why do we say lahadlik ner? Right? Lahadlik. And here we're saying. You have lahadlik ner shel Shabbat, right? You have that. So why does the pasuk say lahalot ner tamid, to bring up? So there's a drasha that you have to light it, and the Torah wants to tell us you have to light it in a way that it's going to go up on its own, that it's not going to need further intervention. And Tosfos says that now the Torah says also it's a ner tamid. It needs to be a constant fire. So the Torah does not want the fire to go out. And as long as the fire could go up on its own, Tosfos says, that's good enough. You don't need that the wick should have burnt, the majority of the wick should have to have burnt in order for you to fulfill the mitzvah of lighting. So the same way when it comes to the menorah, the Torah does not want the menorah to go out. It wants it to be a continuous fire. You just have to, how much do you have to light up the menorah to say, I did my job? As long as it's enough that the fire is going to continue going. I don't have to make sure the majority of the wick gets burnt. I just have to make sure if even a minority of the wick gets burnt, as long as the fire is good to go, I don't have, and doesn't need further poking and twigs to help the fire go, any matches to keep it next to it. So therefore, so too over here. What's the issue over here? We want to make sure that nobody's going to come to play with the fire, to increase the fire. So as long as you have enough wood that it's going to continue burn, that's good enough. So that's what the Gemara says. Tani of Chiyas Yudishma. Today, you got it? 20b, 20a, 3. Today, Sheteshalhevet Ola Me'aleha. As long as you light in a way that the flame could go up by itself, and the flame should not need any other outside help to keep it going. By the way, this is a very famous graduation speech. We are in graduation season now. So the famous graduation, one of the famous graduation speeches they give at graduations, at yeshivot graduations, I say it's famous, maybe that was used at my graduation, but is that the job of a yeshiva, the job of a school, is to, right, Mr. Haber? Mr. Haber, tell me if you like this idea. The job of a yeshiva is to light the student up. But look, the plus said you light. This week's parsha is you light the menorah. The child is like a flame. You have to light him up, that the flame could go up on its own. That the flame should be able to go out to the world, and to be able to stand tall, and to be able to make it, to be able to give him the tools to make it in the world, to give him the tools of Torah study, that you teach him, you light him up with the Esha Torah, with the fire of Torah, that now he's able to learn on his own. Yes, you're in the school, you're in the yeshiva for many years, but now when you step out of the yeshiva, could you open up a book? Could you open a sefer and read it and understand it? That's the job of a school. Of course, the student continuously go to classes and so on and so forth, but he has to be able to go on a bus and go on a train, to be able to go in wherever he goes, go to a Beit Midrash and open up a sefer, crack open the sefer, and be able to, hopefully he broke his teeth in a positive way in school, right, Adam? That then in yeshiva now he can be able to understand it on his own. That's the job, one of the jobs of a school, to train them in that fashion. Okay, so now the Gemara talks about a similar halacha. Eitz yichidi. Here we have one thick big piece of wood, and it's before Shabbat. And I want to light. Now we were talking until now. You're making a whole bonfire. You're making many pieces of fine wood. How much have to be caught on fire? Is it the majority of each and every piece? Is it as long as you have enough? No one's going to ask for more fire, for more help for the fire. And now we have one large piece. Rav says, Rov uvyo. Rav says it has to have enough fire on this piece of wood that the majority of the thickness of the wood, which would be in sync with Rav's early opinion, that he's the more strict opinion when it comes to the fire. He said it needs to have the majority he understands the Mishnah, majority of each and every piece. And here he's saying it's the majority of the thickness of this one piece of wood. But some say that Rav says something else. Or some say that Rav says, Beruf HaKefo. the majority of the circumference of the piece of wood, which the circumference is a smaller amount than it takes to go through the majority of the thickness of the wood. Now, the Gemara says, and the commentary points out that this Gemara of how much, when we're dealing with one piece of wood, one big thick piece of wood, whether you need the thickness of this piece of wood or the circumference, is because we're dealing with one piece of wood. But the earlier Gemara, when you're making a whole bonfire with many pieces of wood, you don't need the circumference of each, either the circumference of every piece of wood or the thickness, just the length of, according to the opinion that says, according to Rav that says you need the majority, you don't need the majority of both sides of the circumference, you need the majority of the length of each piece of wood, because each piece of wood is going to light up the other piece of wood. It's not necessary to have the circumference of each piece of wood or the thickness of each piece of wood, just the length. But here, when we're only dealing with one piece of wood, you don't have another piece of wood to help keep the fire going. So what is going to ensure that the fire is going to continue? So that is the argument here in Rav. What do you need? It comes Amar Papa. Papa says, Hilkach bi'inan rov uvyo v'rov kefo. We need both. It's not clear what we need, majority of the circumference or the majority of the wad of the thickness. So what did he say? We're going to do both. We don't know. So let's take the most. We're going to do both opinions. Now, this Rav Papa, he has a certain style that you find him in other places in the Talmud. That when the Gemara has a question, let's say Birkat Torah, right? We always encourage everyone make sure you say Birkat Torah, blessing on Torah before you come learn Torah. The Gemara has a question: do you say what are the proper brachot to say for Birkat Torah? Rav Papa says, one rabbi says this, one says this, and of course it's different, say them all. So he has this approach a lot of times when there is a safek, when there's a doubt what to do, you should just fulfill, make sure you fill all the opinions. You're going, can't go wrong. The commentators asked, this is a rabbinic law, a rabbinic concern of maybe you're going to come, increase the fire. Meaning you put the fire on before Shabbat. It's a fence that the rabbis are making that we're going to say you require a certain level of the fire has to be reached before Shabbat for you in order to leave it there. But it's a rabbinic fence, so shouldn't you be lenient? So why is he being strict and taking both opinions? He could just take the more lenient opinion, which would be majority of the circumference. So Rav Papa was strict. So one answer is in the Yalkut Biurim and the Masifta Gemara says, because it's a common, since it's common, it's something that a common issue, common problem that you might come, fire is a basic staple of life, so to speak, in the old days, right? Even today, we have heat, we have light, we have fire, and because it's a basic thing in life, there's a concern you might come to the violation of the Torah, because you might come to, because it's something that happens on a regular basis. Every Friday, you must probably be heating up, especially in the wintertime. And therefore, the chances, the opportunities of violating the Torah are very common. And therefore, the rabbis Papa felt that even though we have a rule to be lenient when it comes to rabbinic law, but in a case where there was a concern that the Torah law might be violated so easily that it's a common issue, he took a more strict opinion. That's a nice idea. It's also interesting if you note that the Torah, the commentators talk about, when the Torah talks about Shabbat, right? Which melacha on Shabbat which of the 39 categories the Torah talk about very emphatically and very openly. So one of the main ones that's highlighted in the Torah is don't make a fire on Shabbat. And the commentaries say, I saw in the commentaries, why does the Torah highlight? The Torah doesn't highlight so much the fact that you can't build on Shabbat, can't write on Shabbat, right? It's also the malachot of Shabbat. The Torah doesn't spell it out. There's 39 categories of Torah violation. But when it comes to fire, because fire is a basic thing in life, everybody uses fire. You use fire for heating purposes, you use fire for cooking purposes, you use fire for seeing, to be for vision purposes. So fire, how do you like that, David? Such a common usage. So the Torah has to go ahead. That's why the Torah talks about black and white, opens up and talks about, when it wants to discuss Shabbat, they'll talk about this malacha of fire. Okay. Now the Gemara continues. That which we said about lighting this piece of wood, this individual piece of wood, how much has to be lit? And we said there's an argument, the majority of the thickness or the majority of the circumference. So the Gemara says Ketanoi. This is an argument. We're on the right side of the page on 20A3. There's an argument of earlier rabbis. Rav Chia said, if you're lighting a thick piece of wood before Shabbat, you have to light enough that the wood would be ruined, that you can't use that wood for Uman is a craftsman, a professional will not be able to use that wood. When would that wood not be able to be used anymore? If the fire took hold of the majority of the thickness. If so it says, no, you don't need the majority of the thickness. The fire doesn't have to go through the majority. Thickness is rather kadesha tuchaz ha'esh misesadim. It just has to go on the two sides, on the circumference. As long as you got the majority of the circumference, that's good enough. Even though there's no proof for this, but we do have it's alluded to that it will, once it goes on the circumference, if you got the majority of circumference, it's going to keep on going. It's going to keep on burning. And because it's going to keep on burning, and that will be the reason why you shouldn't have to be worried. As long as you reach that level, you got the majority of the circumference on before Shabbat, then you're good to go. Because it says, Eshnei Kisotav Ochla Ha'esh. The two ends were eaten by the fire. The two ends of the wood, meaning the circumference of the wood was burnt. V'tocho Nochar, and the inside of the wood became dried up from the fire. Hayitzlach l'melacha. If you have a piece of wood that's dried up, it's dried in the inside as a result of the fire on the both sides, is it going to be able to be used for work? Now, this pasuk was a mashal, was a parable for the people of Yerushalayim. The Jewish people were compared to a wild vine that does not give out fruits. And this vine, this grapevine that's wild, that it's worse than other wood, because its wood is not even worthy to be fit to do other work, like other types of wood. It's all, you could take wood, you could go ahead and make a table from wood. You can make pottery from wood. You can whatever. You could do things. You can make things from wood, right? Wooden utensils. But you make a nice bed from wood, a wooden bed. But this wood from this vine, this grapevine that runs wild, it's not even fit for other types of professional use. It's only fit for burning. And the pasuk says, the pasuk continues. Good morning. Good to see you. How are you? The pasuk says that more than that, that after the fire has taken hold of the two ends of this wood from this wild grapevine, the inside becomes dried out from the heat, and certainly it's not going to be able to be used for any type of work. So from the pasuk it says it indicates that when the fire takes hold, when the fire takes hold of both sides, then it's going to be dry on the inside, and the fire will continuously burn the whole thing. Now, you can't. Now the question is, the commentators point out, the rabbi who said that if it gets burnt on the majority of the thickness, that's where it's not fit for work and be used by a craftsman anymore. And the next opinion says, no, you don't need the majority of thickness, you see the majority of the circumference. And this pasuk seems to indicate that the majority of the circumference also makes it not fit for work. So Tosfos says, in general, when you have a piece of wood, a normal piece of wood, from normal wood material, normal tree material, that piece of wood, if it's on both circumference of both sides, does not ruin it to be used for professional use. But in this case, this was the Eitz HaGefen. This was the wood of a wild vine, grapevine, that gets destroyed. That, when it goes on the circumference of both ends, that will not be able to be used for professional work. But in general, the general wood, good morning, general wood would be able to be used even if the fire's on both sides, it's not totally destroyed for professional use. Okay, so the Gemara says, we have another pasuk that discusses, because that pasuk says, if when the two ends, meaning the circumference, was eaten by the fire, and the inside became dry, could you use it for work? You can't use it for work. That's specifically the grapevine that one's wild. Now, we have a story, a very tragic story. We remind Solomon, you prayed already? Very good. Tragic story. We're talking about Yirmiyahu wrote a Megillah. He wrote a Megillah where he sent to Yehoiakim, the Jewish king, and in that Megillah, similar to the Megillah Yirmiyahu, similar to the Megillah Eicha, it discussed the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash, that the first temple is going to be destroyed. So what did the Jewish king do when he saw this? What do you think? He was happy. But instead of repenting, you know what he did? He burnt it. He burnt the Megillah. He burnt the Megillah, the scroll that was written by Yirmiyah, which had the prophecy of the destruction of the temple. It was Megillat Eicha. It was Megillat Eicha. Hashem, God commanded Yirmiyahu to write Megillat Eicha, and he wrote it through his student Baruch ben Neriah. And they brought it to the king Yoyakam. They read the first psukim, and when the reader came to the pasuk that says that the enemies of the Jewish people will be on top, which means that the Jewish kingdom will be destroyed, the king commanded to burn it in the oven. So the pasuk says, it says that, and it was burning. But the burning says the ach was burning. What is the ach? Ma'ach. Ach we know is a brother. Achim anachnu. We're brothers. What's the ach? Amar Rav Huna achvana. It was a fire in the oven that was made from the wood of the willows, aravot, that we have on Sukkot. We have I don't know if you know in the stores in the streets of the Lower East Side, they used to say, Aravot, Aravot, Shena Aravot, we have beautiful Aravot. They made announcements for Aravot. We're going to see how that's happening coming up. And they used the wood of the willow to burn as the fuel, as the sticks of fire to burn this holy Megillah, a holy scroll that was written by Yirmiyah. Shmuel says, you know what the word ach means? Eitzim shenidlaku b'achva. It's wood. They burnt it in wood that was united, like brothers are united. Achim anachnu, we're brothers. That they light with unity, because what's the brotherhood of the wood? Each wood lights the other wood, right, David? That they're joined together, they light each other up. The small piece of wood lights the big piece of wood. So that is the ach. Maybe we could say brothers are supposed to be lighting each other up. Supposed to be, right? Joe, David, right? Right? We have to be lighting, we have to achim. We got to light each other up. So the Gemara wants to bring a support for Rav. Rav says ach is willows. It's referring to willows, not referring to the fact that one wood is lighting the other one up. No, it's not referring to the wood lighting, it's specifically willows. Because there was a man who said, Man boi achvana. Who wants to buy achvana? And what did he take out? He took out the aravot, took out the willows. So we see the willows are achvana, and eshtakach arafta. And this he was selling aravot. Amar Rav Huna. We're discussing, just to bring everybody up to date. We're discussing before Shabbat. The rabbis are concerned that people shouldn't poke at a fire on Shabbat. People shouldn't raise the flame, shouldn't move things around, because one of the prohibitions of Shabbat is making a fire, right? So the rabbis created certain fences to protect that we shouldn't go to make a fire on or play with the fire on Shabbat. Because, nobody's going to start a fire on Shabbat, but but the fire's already there. You might play with it a little bit, and therefore to ensure that, the rabbi said the fire has to reach a certain level before Shabbat, that you don't have to be concerned that you're going to come to do something with that fire on Shabbat. So now, morning, Jack. So now come Rav Huna. Rav Huna says, Kanim ein svichen rov. We were discussing about wood, about the majority of the wood being, majority of each piece being on fire, or the majority of the circumference, you have to have the majority of the circumference has to be on fire before Shabbat. But comes Rav Huna and it says, when you deal with these long reeds, kanim ain't tzricha. You don't need to have the majority of the reeds lit before Shabbat. As long as you got some of the reed going, because it's very long, that reed is going to continuously burn, and it's normal that the fire goes very well. And the language was konim, it's plural, sounds like we're dealing with multiple reeds, and the fire will keep on going, and you don't have to worry about the fire might go, that you might come to assist to help the fire. But if you tied the reeds together, that's only if you left the reeds, you're making the fire. Listen, you want a certain amount of heat. You have a multiply. One reed is not going to do the trick. But if you tie the reeds together, so then the flame doesn't have as much room to catch because you didn't space it out. So if it's tied together, then he holds Shrichen Rov. Then you have to go ahead and have the fire. It won't ignite as easily, and therefore you have to go ahead and make sure majority is lit. Okay, to be continued tomorrow, everybody. Hopefully we'll finish the Perek tomorrow. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you, Rabbi. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you. Good day. Ronnie, have a great day. Asaf, have a great day.